here's an interesting example. We just completed a project for Yale University. It's a Weiss Center for Innovative Thinking. And here was a sort of a brief where it was near all these labs, including the wonderful Beckman lab by Marcel Breuer, but in the back behind like 5 different buildings, super complicated site. And the client thought that we were simply going to do an addition to one of the existing buildings there and effectively expand out on that footprint to put this little 12,000 square foot, sort of addition into focus. And so many of our buildings are really tied to really weaving into the landscape. And here was a case where we actually said, no, we think the most important way to answer this was to make one perfect oval of self-supporting curvilinear glass, 22 feet high, that would become this really transparent loft in the middle of all the constellation of the buildings around there. And then we, in effect, invented a courtyard that never existed there and reconnected landscapes and brought trees in and, changed landforms and cut down concrete walls so we could create a setting for this perfect little building. And so, in many ways, we were doing both, but the apparent work was the building. And yet the intrinsically most important work was the creation of that site so that that could be a legible destination.
That project, what was the name of the project again?
It's a Weiss Center for Innovative Thinking at Yale.
Right, Weiss Center. That project was actually the one I was thinking about, and I don't know how you view it, but when I said that you're creating works that are responsive, but also they stand out and they have their own identity. And it's really interesting that something that on the surface, the building on the surface would seem to be very self-centered. It's a sculptural kind of thing. It's very elegant, whatever, but it's a sculptural thing. It's a standalone object in space that would produce, exterior spaces and community and all the things that you're talking about. And that's what I was saying before. It's like you can have a standalone building and it can do all the stuff if it's done, in the right way. It's very fascinating.
Yeah, I mean, that was a lot of fun. But talk about tuning a building. I mean, there's some crazy things that were going on. Among other things, the ring beam of that oval had to land. It was over a lab building. So we had to actually be able to land on a series of columns that were below grade. So this oval had to just land just so to be able to carry the loads down. We also had to have a skylight on top that went through the center of the building to go all the way down to illuminate a lab that had a named skylight. So we actually had to carry a skylight through 3 floors now. And then there was the notion of the kind of standoff of all the buildings so that we could create enough room and breathing room so that you could get sunlight so landscape could grow. And it was a cutting down of one of the original Marcel Breuer walls that made that plinth or roof a kind of isolated, distinct place to make it now not a roof, but in fact a destination. Right. So there were many, many things that were changed incredibly subtly, so including slipped in ADA ramps that would allow it to connect to the other buildings nearby. But we were able to actually take all the mechanical equipment, for instance, for the building and bury it under that plinth so that the building would have less burden on its form and its expression. So, it was really appropriating all the possibilities around it to allow it to be such a simple form.
Yeah, I think that level of intervention and the subtlety, like you mentioned, that's really fantastic. And obviously, when you first see it from an aerial view, I was first reminded of Ian Pei's at the Louvre, right?
The pyramid?
Yeah, the pyramid, like this just crystalline thing. And I've always wondered, it's kind of a side question, like for Ian Pei, when he proposed that, were people like, what the hell is this? You're creating a glass pyramid that has nothing to do with...
Parisians would probably be like, what?
But it works so well. I don't know if it's because I've gotten used to it, but I think it works fantastic.
It works incredibly well. Right? It's really an incredible, extraordinary solution to a very complicated problem.